This is a information session on housing, broader than homemade. We're involved in housing, but it's much broader than that. So thank you so much for coming, and there'll be plenty of time for questions, conversation, and so yeah, thank you.
Great. So just a few housekeeping notes. As I said, the restrooms are just down the hall. Feel free to get up at any point. We are filming this for circulation. And let's see. And then I also just wanted to share that we have these little cards. So if you have a burning question, a topic that you definitely like us to address, please write it on the card, or we'll have a session, a time for questions and answers a little bit later. Thank you for coming out, even though the inclement weather forecast is upon us. And I just wanted to say, to sort of frame this presentation in this space, we're sitting in a building at Coretta Scott King's alma mater. And she dedicated her life, and she has a legacy of social justice advocacy and activism. And she and her husband Martin were also major proponents of fair and affordable housing. In a moment, Dr. Kevin McGruder will share more about why housing is a social justice issue and a major piece of equity and equality. But as we think about the issue of affordability facing our beloved village today, I'm reading what Alex wrote, just to give her a shout out. So I encourage you to hold this quote from Coretta close to your heart. And that is that the greatness of a community is most accurately measured by the compassionate acts of its members. And I also just wanted to thank those of you who already submitted questions and topics online and through our portal on our website. So we'll work to respond to all of your questions, and then again there will be Q&A time at the end. I just wanted to give an overview of the program for today. So we're going to start with the man, the legend, Dr. Kevin McGruder, history professor, historian, former Community Development Corporation wizard, chief financial officer of CDC work in Harlem, what doesn't he know and what can't he do? So he literally wrote the book on race and real estate. He told me not to really say much to introduce him, but he has been my financial mentor and my community development finance mentor, and we've been working together for going on 9 years now, and he has been our board treasurer, and he's really just an extraordinary human, as we all know. So as he's preparing to get up, that will be followed then by a what, where, why, who, and how presentation by me. Then we'll have approximately 15 minutes for questions and answers. Then we have an interactive visioning exercise and some small breakout groups, a group report out on next steps, and then a bit of time for socializing at the end, including asking more questions. And this is not the only opportunity you'll have to interact with me and with the other homemade staff. So, Kevin?
Thank you, Emily, and again, thank you all for coming. Emily asked me to take a few minutes to talk about why housing is a social justice issue, and to pick up, maybe expand a little bit on my own background. So I've been working in housing since I graduated from college in 1979 and began working with the City of Cleveland Department of Community Development Corporation, and worked with local housing organizations, national housing organizations since then, in Cleveland, New York, Philadelphia, and so some of the history I'll be talking about, I've lived because I'm 66 now, and part of it is, maybe just to start with the conclusion. Housing is a social justice issue because is the main avenue of wealth accumulation in the United States for most families. And so if you don't have an opportunity to own a home, you have a real limit on your wealth accumulation. When we look at it from a race and real estate point of view, Black household wealth, well, let me start. White household wealth roughly is about $100,000 per family. That's what they, if you subtract what they own, if you subtract what they owe from what they own, the net is they have wealth of $100,000. Black household wealth tends to be in the range of $10,000. So that's 10 times difference. And so that has a lot to do with what people can do with their lives. But also, residential location is closely tied to education opportunities. The quality of housing affects emotional and physical health. And neighborhoods vary in exposure to environmental and crime hazards. And you're probably aware of the term environmental racism, that a lot of those hazards tend to be in places where people of color live. And the notion that where one lives impacts the probability of success, that's an indicator of the injustice. And so what I want to do is kind of explain how we get here really briefly. Because when you think about, when we look at the land and we talk about neighborhoods, we almost take it as a given. Like if you say Black neighborhood, that's almost a code word for not in good shape. Now, it did not have to be that way, but there are some real particular reasons why it is that way. If we go back to the 1800s, some of those roots lie there, that American culture, part of our culture is the, kind of pick yourself up by your bootstraps, that idea. And when you look at what that meant in housing in the 1800s, the poor lived in the worst areas, the wealthy lived in better areas, and the idea was, well, that's just the way it's supposed to be. As we move into the 1900s, reformers, particularly those who were educated in Europe, Britain, Germany, began to see what they were doing. These are what we now call progressives, not the progressive meaning today, but progressives. And they began to say, well, we can use knowledge to improve things. And housing was one of the things they focused on. So in the early 1900s, you get the first interventions in terms of housing, but they're not national, not major. The Great Migration that begins with Black people moving, hundreds of thousands, eventually millions of Black people moving from southern cities to the north, starting in the teens, and now we know that movement continued well into almost the 70s. That changes, particularly neighborhoods in the north and residential patterns. So in 1900, 90% of Black people lived in the South. So if you were in a northern city, often there wasn't a racial problem because there weren't a whole lot of Black people there. And that doesn't mean there wasn't any limit, but white people were not particularly worried because there weren't a lot of Black people. So sometimes you have Black people living in a lot of different places. As their numbers increase, you get what's now called racial steering. So they're steered to certain neighborhoods. So the Harlem Renaissance is the Harlem Renaissance because Black people were steered to Harlem. They could have, ideally without discrimination, they would have been spread out throughout that city. And you can look at all northern cities, almost all northern cities, there's some variation of that. What that does is it really allows for discrimination to happen. So the area that I study is Harlem, and what happens there is that Black people are paying maybe 30 to 50% more for housing that's dilapidated. And discrimination pays, and because they don't have other options. And that plays out in other cities as well. The Depression is the event that changes the level of intervention. So before 1933, if you were going to build a house, often what people did is just wait until they had the cash to build it. Or they would pay 50%, they would have 50% of it, and then they would borrow. And often it was from a familiar with now, long-term financing did not exist before the Depression. The reason why the Depression leads to that is in rural cities and cities, people are on the street. They are on the street. If they didn't have a loan, that loan was called during the Depression. Often had a clause where it can be called. The banks are going under, and the banks go under, their assets are being seized, and those mortgages are assets. And so it's a level of homelessness that had never been seen before. And so these progressives that I was talking about in the early 1900s, by that time, people like Frances Perkins, who was in labor, she becomes the first woman secretary in the cabinet. But in housing, those people are now in positions of power, and what they do is put in place ideas that the government should intervene. And what they do is create, in 1934, they passed the National Housing Act. That creates the Federal Housing Administration. And and it's FHA, it still exists. I have an FHA loan. That's how I was able to live in Yellow Springs. So those loans do, what they do is they incentivize lenders to make long-term loans because lenders were not used to that. And they were saying, well, I don't want to make a 20 or 25-year loan. I don't know if these people are going to pay. The government creates a mortgage insurance program that says we'll insure those loans. If people can't pay, the mortgage insurance will be called on, and you will get paid. And so the kind of mortgage, 25, 30-year mortgages, that's when that begins to happen. Ironically, there's a racially discriminatory element of that, and it's laid out in a book by Richard Rothstein called The Color of Law. So that mortgage insurance, the federal government decides they want to rate neighborhoods, the risk in those neighborhoods, and they create maps rating neighborhoods. And the lowest risk is green, and the highest risk is red. You know, it's reasonable for them to do that, but they add a racial overlay to it. And it's almost regardless of the stock, the quality of the housing stock. If it's a predominantly black neighborhood, it's going to be red. It's probably a white neighborhood, it's probably going to be green. If not, it's going to be blue, which is the next. It's seen as very stable. If it's a neighborhood racially mixed, it's seen as risky because by that time, the thinking is a racially mixed neighborhood is on its way to becoming all black. And that's not always the case. But because they rate it that way, it becomes the case. What that does is, so if a lender is depending on mortgage insurance to decide to make a loan, and somebody from a red neighborhood comes to them, they're not going to be able to get an FHA loan because they're not going to get insured. And so those neighborhoods become segregated. They were already segregated, but they become dilapidated. And they weren't necessarily, totally dilapidated. And what it also does is it leaves an opportunity for loan sharks, and people do what they call installment loans or land contracts, where there's a book called Family Property. Beryl Satter, her father was a lawyer in Chicago, he bought property. And so what a land contract is people buy a house on an installment plan, and it sounds reasonable, but the problem is they don't get the deed until they pay it totally off. And if they miss a payment, everything's gone. And that, anybody can be late on the payment, miss it. And so that creates that dynamic. And so the Housing Act brings all that into play. And I won't go into a lot more details on that, but that sets the tone. Even by World War II, the GI Bill and suburbanization is happening. And the GI Bill has a racial overlay too, is that some of those suburbs that are being created, they have restrictions about black people living there. There are some restrictions on black GIs being able to get it. So that wealth number that I was mentioning that's the history behind it. And so grandparents who were white were able to get housing cheap in the suburbs, and now it's hundreds of thousands of dollars of value, and black people couldn't get there, didn't get that. Emily mentioned we're in the Coretta Scott King Center and the importance of Coretta Scott King and Martin Luther King, and it's not, kind of a general connection, it's a direct connection. The civil rights movement and direct action raises visibility about working for social change, and housing becomes one of those things that people are pushing for. And that and the civil unrest, the various what we call riots, but now they're often called uprisings, Detroit, Watts, these places, housing is often part of the things that people are complaining about. In 1966, Martin Luther King brings his nonviolent direct action to Chicago. And if you go online, there's video of him leading a march against discriminatory housing in the all-white suburb of Cicero. And that's one of the areas that was not a success to him. He ended up getting hit in the head with a rock and retreating. But when they panned the crowd, people were shocked because there were mothers with babies in carriages, the N-word and all that. And it kind of opened people's eyes because, one, he was in the North, and they were used to him being in the South getting resistance, and so that opened people's eyes. But that's the legacy of that earlier period during the Great Migration. So Chicago in particular, it had fairly ethnically uniform white neighborhoods, and they were defending those neighborhoods. And that was the practice. And so that's how we get there. Martin Luther King is killed April 4th, 1968, he's murdered. And a week later, Lyndon Johnson is able to get Congress that had been looking at a Civil Rights Act that included a fair housing clause. April 11th, they finally pass it, and he pushes them to say, you do this in honor of Martin Luther King. That becomes the Fair Housing Act. And that's one of the main pieces of legislation that we look at when we're looking at housing discrimination. The Department of Housing and Urban Development had already been created by that time, and it's the cabinet department that manages that. And what it does is it outlaws discrimination in housing, in both sales, rentals. It is a challenge because it doesn't do it in an offensive way. People have to file a complaint, and everybody doesn't want to file a complaint. People want a house, so a lot of them move forward. But that moves the federal government. It builds on the work that had begun during the Depression, part of what happened in the Depression. So public housing comes out of the National Housing Act, all of that. But in terms of neighborhood developments, it's really the 1970s when, through the Community Development Block Grant, that it really comes from the Nixon administration. His idea was, let me send the money to the states, they'll send it to the cities, and the cities will decide. So the program I worked on when I started working in Cleveland in 1979, it was a 312 loan program, which is a loan program for people who own their homes. They could get up to, I think it was up to $20,000 to renovate for housing. And so that's the kind of work. Neighborhood development, community development corporations like HomeAid were getting community development grant money as well. And so that, 70s and the 80s, in the 80s, the tax law was revised and the low-income housing tax credit was created. And that's the Reagan administration, and he was looking at how can we use the market rather than federal cash to spur housing. So, I won't go into a lot of detail on how it works, but I know it's been in the news a lot. But the money that comes to projects is not coming from the federal government. The federal government is giving investors tax credits, and those investors pay to get those credits, and their money is what's going into the project. And it is effective. As you know, if you've been reading the papers, it has a lot of limitations. But that's really the main federal program that's available now. Other programs, senior citizens housing, the 202 program, those programs were there as well. But when we look at kind of this idea of social justice and housing, some of it is preserving existing housing, building new housing, There has been talk about pushing to bring down the barriers around housing discrimination, and that I have not seen, kind of the program to do that, and that's a whole other conversation. But that's, kind of a relatively quick overview of that. But the wealth creation, I would say, is the biggest takeaway, particularly with home ownership, that if people cannot get to home ownership, their ability to accumulate wealth is going to be very limited. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. If anyone has questions, please write them down unless it is burning at this moment. Okay. So I was going to say, too, that a big part of the fair housing is about affirmatively furthering fair housing. So there's a lot of emphasis right now on creating housing in high opportunity areas, not just investing in disinvested communities, so that there's more housing choice, because now you can predict life expectancy by zip code. So I looked my address up, and then I looked up some addresses in Springfield, which is just down the road. And my life expectancy is over 13 years longer than some of our neighbors just down the road. And that really comes down to access to opportunity, access to wealth, the fabric, how strong is the social network, the quality of the schools, and there are a lot of pieces that go into that. But our model is really about fairness across place, and it's about creating opportunities for inclusion. I also just want to talk about for just a second before I start my official program that I know that it's very challenging to talk about race and access to wealth building and class together. That's a challenging overlay. And so one of the things that I would just say that we've observed over the years is that while it is true that affordable housing is an issue that impacts Black Americans first and most, hurts first and worst, as they say, a broader number of white Americans qualify for those benefits and are benefiting from affordable housing services. And that's true of a lot of different markers. So what we're really focused on is Heather McGee's concept and framework around the solidarity dividend, which is the idea that multiracial coalitions can come together to do what is often difficult to do in a silo. Also, let me introduce myself. I'm Emily Seibel. I'm the Executive Director of Yellow Springs Home Inc., and this summer I'll be celebrating 15 years. And I can't even believe that, actually. And I went to Antioch College. I graduated from there with a degree in social and global studies with a concentration in economics, and the rest is history. So what I wanted to just share too, as we're sort of transitioning from Kevin's presentation into how does that translate to Yellow Springs, is the Community Land Trust itself is a very powerful means of community self-determination, and it's based in part on Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s global vision of the beloved community, in which all people can share in the wealth of the earth, and where homelessness, poverty, and hunger will not be tolerated. Peaceful conflict, resolution, and reconciliation triumph over fear and hatred in the beloved community, while racism and all forms of discrimination will be replaced by inclusion. Love and trust will prevail through cooperation, friendship, and goodwill. Yellow Springs, as many of you know, has always, since its first days, embraced a utopian vision. And while we fall short, there is a kind of perfection in the attempt. Yellow Springs Home Inc., thanks to some really forward-thinking folks, visionaries, we were one of the first 600 community land trusts in the world. And we continue to be one of the smallest geographic areas hosting a community land trust. And so we are enduring despite the odds, and that's really because of the support and involvement of our community. Okay, so this is our Articles of Incorporation from 1995. And you can see we're staying true to our purpose and our mission. And so as a community land trust, what we're really trying to do is answer a few key questions. One, how do we have an active rather than passive role in what happens to our community in terms of housing, development, and access to housing? Two, how do we maintain long-term control over what happens in our community to preserve access to homeownership and rentals and preserve the public investment? And three, how do we have a say in sustaining access to homeownership as housing prices continue to rise? What can we do in the wake of escalating gentrification together? It is because of the strength of our community that HomeInc exists and endures. And it is, my mouse isn't working. It is hard to believe that we are now celebrating 25 years. We just finished our 25th year in existence. So we believe that housing is a fundamental human right, and our strategy is one, as I said earlier, of fairness across place. We also believe that power is a verb and that access to power for the historically marginalized is best achieved through solidarity and shared governance. And I actually think even more than the housing that we're developing and even more than the community land trust sort of approach to preserving affordability, the shared governance piece is really the most beautiful part of our mission in action. And I'll talk more about that. So we're dedicated to making and keeping quality housing affordable in a particular place for lasting inclusion. And so with this in mind, I'm very delighted to share an overview of some of our accomplishments. And then I will also just note, I don't have a picture of all of us that's recent, but we're a 12-member board. We also have some emeritus board members, and we have a staff of 4 full-time employees plus 2 part-time employees. And we just did a survey, and together, across a lot of different areas of housing development, we have close to 1,000 years of combined experience, which doesn't even seem possible. So here's what we were able to do, some highlights, and that is really together, because this is not, it's not like HomeInc is over here. HomeInc is your community land trust. So we did this together. And it's really incredible to see what we've been able to accomplish as a village, because there are places 10 times our size that don't have an organization like HomeInc. And we're very fortunate. And so I just want to emphasize that today, Yellow Springs HomeInc Homes currently house more than 80 residents, and that includes more than 25 children. 2 programs that we are lesser known for, but I try to emphasize when we do this kind of thing, is that we also do major home repair grants. We are doing those continually, and we're growing the programs. So this year we're passing through more than $400,000 in major home repair grants for homeowners, and this is 26 projects. We also do low interest mortgage packaging in-house. We're one of the only places in the state that is certified to work directly with the USDA, and so we actually we get calls from other counties, but those don't have to be homes that are purchased through HomeInc. They can be purchased other places as long as it's in a qualifying eligible area, and those interest rates are subsidized by the USDA down to 1%. But it's a sliding scale. So, and then this is a hot off the press map. Thank you, Alex. Alex Scott is our outreach and fundraising manager. And she actually served on our board of directors, or trustees, for 5 years before she joined the staff. So, So anyway, this includes all of our rentals. We have 14 rentals, 26 permanently affordable homeownership homes, and all of the home repair grant recipients. So you can just, there are different colors for and icons for different programs, but just kind of gives you a snapshot.
Could you repeat that? 15 rentals?
14 rentals and 26 for sale homes, so 40 units in the portfolio. So I was at a meeting a couple of years ago when someone, I'm not going to say who, asked this question to a whole group of people, throwing his hands up in the air. What does affordable mean anyway? And I said, affordable to whom? That's really the question. We're a people-centered mission. So we have a person-centered approach, and so we really go off area median income. And here's the chart. This was updated in April of 2024. Changes every year. And so each year the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development calculates area median income for every geographic region in the United States from U.S. Census-based American Community Survey data. The AMI, or area median income, is the midpoint of the region's income distribution. So that means that half of the entire population is in our area is at or below 100% of area median income, and half is above. Any questions about that before I move to the next slide? And so as we celebrate our 25 years of impact, I thought we could start with the most important part of our program, the people. We have a lot more work to do, but I did want to just make sure that you got a snapshot of some of the folks who live in Yellow Springs Homing Houses. And these are people who have links to the community in so many different ways. I've just listed a few of them on here, but there are many, many more. And so to respond to a couple of questions that were submitted before this, there were 3 turnovers in the last year. One family home was resold to a single mother who is a nurse and has been active on our waiting list for more than 8 years. And we also had 2 rentals turn over. Both were 1-bedroom units reserved for persons with special needs, qualifying special needs, including seniors. And both of those units did go to seniors who are on the waiting list, which is ordered with a lottery. And then here are just some barriers to housing, access, and affordability. Because affordable housing is not just about the price or the cost. It's also about quality, health, safety, accessibility, access, and education. So I just wanted to note that it's a more holistic picture, and I think that's really, really important, especially listening to folks in the community about what their housing concerns are. And then I just like to note, is there a problem? I don't have any, I do have notes on this slide. Okay, so these are just some statistics. I just want to make sure that you can see. So at Yellow Springs Homing, we get calls every week. Some folks are desperate, some are excited, some have kids that go to school here and they'd love to live here. Some want to bring their aging parents, have a place for them to live. I mean, there are a lot of different situations. Who used to live here, grew up here, and has been displaced and would love to come back. So we get calls every week. We now have more than 350 households in our interest lists. And then from the Bowen Housing Needs Assessment, which is a little outdated now, but it's really the most recent info we have, an estimated 465 households in Yellow Springs today are housing cost burdened.
How many total households are there, and what percentage is that 465, do you know?
Yes, so that is an estimated 251 renter-occupied households, which is 43% of all renters, and 15% of all owner-occupied housing units at another 214 households. And housing cost burden is defined by HUD as paying more than 30% of your gross income to housing costs. I'll also say that from this, so family rental units are by far and away the top housing need. In Yellow Springs, it's also the hardest nut to crack with the existing funding sources. There is also pent-up demand for accessible housing, for senior-focused rentals, starter for sale family housing, and that's across the income range for very low, moderate, and middle-income households. And then I update this slide every year. This is from, I guess, February. But I just like to show that it takes a lot to make a house affordable. It's not an easy fix. So that is why we're committed to perpetual affordability. And I think this number is low. Actually, the 348, I think we're seeing higher. So bottom line, Yellow Springs is getting less affordable for people of average and moderate income. The median income in Yellow Springs can no longer afford the median home sale price. And so investing in affordable housing is a key strategy for us to answer the question, how do we have a say in what kind of community we want to be? And while this feels daunting, there is a proven and effective solution, which is your community land trust. And that's really, again, thanks to the support of you, the support of the community, because we're all in this together. But what this slide means in particular, I just want to highlight this, is that only top income earners can afford to access our housing market, unless they come with considerable wealth, which means they're probably not a first-time home buyer, for example. And that means that 71% of the population, over 70% of the general population, those making less than 142% of area median income cannot afford to enter our homeownership market. And think about all the workers, all the jobs, all the people that represents that we probably interact with in some way, but imagine how much stronger that would be if we could all live and work and interact together and strengthen those social connections. So what is a community land trust? How many do you know, Alex?
Like 7.
Okay, great. Community, I split it up. Community, as broad a base of people as possible. We are of, by, and for the community. That means the wider community. Home Inc. is not a private interest group. Home Inc. is a community land trust. So we're a community of folks who are committed to the idea of an inclusive village where people are able to live, work, and play with sufficient resources and safe, affordable housing. Land. We approach land as a community asset that should be democratically controlled for the greater good in perpetuity. The Community Land Trust is a vehicle for community-driven land ownership, stewardship, and decision-making. And I didn't have time to put in a lot of the history, but we could have just had this session on the roots of the Community Land Trust model and how it is uniquely American and came out of the Southern Civil Rights Movement. There are incredible documentaries about this, and anyway, if you want to know more, I'll be around. You can find me. And we also believe that the CLT is, I said that. And then trust. Trust is the foundation of our mission. That's really kind of the whole point. So we're charged, we're entrusted with holding on to this land in trust in forever to benefit the community through place-based affordable housing. We can also do other stuff on that land, but affordable housing has been our primary strategy. We're a nonprofit organization, and we are accountable to the people of Yellow Springs. And our governance structure, which, if you remember, I said is my favorite part of the CLT model, is deeply democratic. So people who live in Home Inc. houses serve on our board, and at least a third of our board members have to be constituency representatives, people with lived experience, who understand what it means to be low to moderate income in Yellow Springs. That's really important because that's how we get to the good solutions. And then this ladder represents the continuum of both building and lasting community and control and affordability. I could also do a whole session just on how this works in the context of permanently affordable home ownership, but because we're doing a broader overview, I just included this one slide. But essentially, there is a spectrum of community control, lasting affordability, and wealth building. And so our rental program is designed to support households of very low income with housing stability and accessibility and access that is affordable. And then the middle rung is the community land trust home ownership. So renters on average earn about $16 a year in terms of housing, building housing related wealth, I believe is the statistic. And community land trust homeowners earn quite a bit more than that. I think one study showed maybe $1,700 a year. But the idea is that there's a significant one-time subsidy. We're balancing, removing barriers to accessing home ownership, removing barriers to wealth building and equity, with the need to have a permanently affordable stock of housing to benefit the community. So it's an attempt to balance. And that balancing act is something that the board is charged with reassessing. Is it working? Do we need to correct the formula for how much wealth someone earns versus how much is paid forward through a cap on the resale price to the next household? But you know, if we're putting $100,000 in subsidy into a home in a particular place, given how precious land is here, we believe that it is responsible to the future generations to have a mechanism to sustain that access and affordability while also providing wealth building. And then here are some of the ongoing ways that the Community Land Trust is entrusted and charged with stewardship over time for ongoing public benefit. And I am happy to say that we have not had a single foreclosure in the 25-year history of Yellow Springs Homing, because that is the fastest way to lose wealth accumulation is through foreclosure. So that is another presentation. Okay. So then, what do? These are the things. These are the areas, the buckets that we play in. And so in 2024, we are gearing up to launch the Cascades Phase 1, a project that has been in the making for well over a decade. We're fundraising actively for Cascades Phases 2 and 3, and I'll have a little slideshow, or I have a little overview of that project a little later on. And then we're also supporting the efforts of our public bodies to explore the feasibility for siting family rental housing. This is not a project that we are leading right now, but we are supporting, we're walking with our public bodies as they decide, is this something that is feasible? Is the will there? Is a site available that is a win-win for all parties? We also have 26 major home repair grants we are currently administering. Again, that's a little over $400,000, and that's things like roofs, water pipe replacement, really significant structural damage and improvements. And then we have coalition work. Some numbers. These slides will be available after this. And then we serve over 75 households a year through our client community first programs. But again, those are less well known, but really important and make a huge impact in our core mission focus areas. And so again, please, we were always receiving applications. The portal on our website is always open to apply for the homeownership suite of programs, which includes low interest mortgage packaging. And then also, we always have an RFP open now for home repair grants. So if you know anybody, please just send them over to our website to learn more. And then here's just a little mission spotlight. So, I'll just let you. How many of you remember Gavin Mason? Okay, well, he was legendary and it's nice to be nice, try it. There's a Gabby Mason Day, good people. And then founded in 2019, the Inclusive and Resilient Yellow Springs Coalition has been meeting pretty much bi-weekly to discuss a range of topics through the lens of diversity, equity, and inclusion to supplement the housing work that's being done. That's why we're involved with it. So our mission as a coalition is to support diverse communities in Yellow Springs by identifying and removing barriers to opportunity and success. Okay, wrap it up. All right, so the next thing is, what does it take to make a project happen? I made this today. This is a multi-year process, regardless of the size of the project. A tremendous amount of things have to come together. None of it makes sense. It's all really complicated. It's like the chicken and the egg at the same time, and they can't exist in the same place, but they have to. I mean, it's weird. Anyway, so these are the steps that are involved. And the thing I really want to point out is that construction is the easy part. That's the fun part at the end of the process. And then these are just some examples of housing subsidies that are available for different area median incomes. But I do want to note that we are able to provide homeownership opportunities for folks making under 80% of area median income too. So this chart's a little off. By far the biggest challenges for funding are family rentals with 3 and 4 bedrooms. We have not been able to crack the code on that, so I think that's something as a community we're going to have to come together and figure out. And then no funder wants to be all in. So there's a stack for every project. It's called the funding stack. And it's very layered. And I would say right now, the lowest area median income we're serving is under 5%. And that's with a Section 8 voucher program that pays 2/3 of the rent. And then sometimes they pay all of the rent for a short period of time if someone has a job loss or no income. And then our highest AMI served is a little over 100% of area median income. We had a question online about how projects are funded. This is an example of a funding stack. You can see the village put in 3% of the Glen Cottages pocket neighborhood. The fact that it's affordable means that a lesser amount of debt can be carried by the project, and that's even more true for rentals. This is the Cascades, and then here is the funding stack for the Cascades Phase 1. Again, the village is coming in at about 3%. And the reason we got 3% from the state is partly because of the local support. They wrote that. They gave us an exception because usually they only fund 50% of the project. Thank you to the Senior Housing Working Group. Here are some upcoming events. Please note them. Come dance with us in September, and we hope you'll join us for our annual meeting. Here are some ways we can get more involved. Number one, we would like everyone to be a member of the Land Trust. And I will just leave this on while we take questions. Alex, how much time do we have for questions?
Hang on. We were pretty good on 15.
Oh, great. Okay. I'll read the first question. I have it sitting in front of me. What methods are you using to ensure that you and community partners are making data-driven decisions? That's a great question. So I think I went through some of the data in the presentation, but we definitely look to HUD. We look to American Community Survey data. We look to Housing and Urban Development Census data. And then we do our own internal surveys as well. For example, the Livable, Equitable, Age-Friendly Yellow Springs program did a community survey that got over 100 responses. And one of the things that we learned from that is that one of the biggest issues facing residents in Yellow Springs is the quality of rental housing. So that's something that we have started looking into more robustly. What other
Can you speak
questions?
a little bit to the data-driven decisions in the current LIHTC proposal?
Oh, yeah, of course, yeah. So that's, again, by far our greatest housing need as a community is family rental housing. There's pent-up demand for more than 250 units, actually, of housing affordable to people making less than $75,000 a year. And 200 of those units would be serving folks making less than $50,000 a year. Yes, Malta von Matheson.
Yes, do we know why so many homes in Yellow Springs have gone past the place where folks can afford to buy in? What's happened? Because it wasn't always like that. What changed?
That's a big question. What changed? So I think one of the reasons for that is limited supply. We have a green belt around us. We have not done a lot to encourage different kinds of development. It's also, I think, because of the amenities and opportunities here. So we're kind of a luxury market, if you will. And then also, houses really jumped up when the highway was put in, actually. So it's a transportation access.
675?
Yeah, yes.
When was that?
Hmm?
When was that?
I don't know.
I think it was in the 80s.
80s,
Late 70s, early 80s.
But and there are other reasons too.
Families are a lot smaller.
1969.
You got 3 people in a house, and if you look at the census,
Completed by 89.
let's say they have 8 or 10 people in the same house.
Yes, and he was also saying households are growing smaller. Does anyone else have a question?
I do. With the new proposed housing development on East Union Road, you're talking about, your hope is you're going to have at least 40 students that will go to those from schools. What defines a family? And can you give input as to what the apartments will look like? Are they going to be for seniors? Are they going to be strictly for multi-families? Can you share information on that?
Are you talking about if
Yeah.
the low-income housing tax credit family project materializes?
Yes.
Yeah. So my understanding is that the rentals, so family means it's open to everybody. So it's not restricted to people with children, for example. But you design for the population that you're serving. And then you're allowed to match household numbers of bedrooms with household sizes, if that makes sense.
Because restricting to families with children would be violating fair housing laws.
Yeah, right. It would get right. If we restricted it to just families with children, that would be a violation of fair housing. Yes, Linda Cox.
On the new Cascades, do you foresee that a lot of seniors will be applying for those apartments?
Yes.
They're being built to accommodate the seniors.
Yeah, so the Cascades project, which I just kind of breezed through, here's a rendering of it. So there are 22 rentals that will be built out over 3 phases, and all of those are really going to be designed and built to serve the needs of seniors in Yellow Springs. We know that there is a demand and a need for this, and senior housing activists actually handpicked this site because of its proximity to amenities, potential for partnership. That being said, we had a ton of public input as we shaped our vision for this, and people said we also want an option for families. So they're white here, but they won't be white. They'll have colors. But so this is 10 for-sale townhomes, which is in phase 4, and those will be 2-story a fully accessible downstairs that has everything you need. So it's technically would be considered intergenerational housing or housing that could meet the needs of a variety of populations, including seniors. But there will also be 1 to 2 bedrooms upstairs. So the idea is that these are facing the residential corridor along Marshall Street and that they will be available for families.
You said that was phase 2?
That's phase 4.
Phase 4.
It's 32 units altogether.
How long is the phases? What time period between each phase?
That's really depends on fundraising. She asked how long between the phases. What we've sketched out internally is that we would be beginning to end 2 years to develop each project phase, and then that we would try to integrate the for-sale phase throughout that. So between now and 2029, I guess, is the idea. But it's totally contingent on fundraising. Yes.
I have another question that I've seen asked around town. I wish that that person or those people were here to ask it themselves, but I didn't know the answer. So with the LIHTC project, why are the apartments coming out to average so much? So
The costs?
yes, exactly.
Yeah, so these projects are expensive to build, and that is because they have a ton of oversight and regulation. There are equity syndicators who are involved because there are tax credits. It just adds a lot of layers of oversight. And then also we have to build to high and rigorous environmental standards. There are accessibility requirements, and there's just a lot of things that go into it to make them expensive. These are also not as expensive as a LIHTC project would be, but they're still, it just takes a lot to get these off the ground.
Is there some infrastructure as well? So that's built in with the infrastructure. If they're just taking a large number and dividing it by the number of apartments, that wouldn't include any infrastructure costs.
Oh yeah, so that total development cost is everything. So
Yeah.
it's financing costs, acquisition, syndicator fees, energy efficiency certifications, the on-site infrastructure, off-site infrastructure, aid to construction, and there's a ton that goes into it. That's not just the hard construction cost. Thank you for leading me there. Yeah. Cheryl?
Yes, heard the same question around our lovely social media. Can you talk a little bit more about your partnership or collaboration with the village over the years, and how that evolved and why it's important, relationship to you?
Yeah, definitely. So Yellow Springs Home Inc. was born out of a discussion that started at Village Council in the 90s. Folks were worried about the rising cost of housing, what we could do to get out ahead of that. Well, if we've done that, I'm not sure. And do our best to make sure that we're a really inclusive community where all incomes are celebrated. And so one of the next steps was that the village commissioned a task force to study different models of affordable housing, and they recommended the creation of a community land trust based on their research. And in part, that's because Arthur Morgan has a historical tie. Yellow Springs has historical ties to this model. Again, this is another presentation, but so we really have always been. It's had to be that a partnership. Cities and CLTs or municipalities and community land trusts really have to work together because no one organization or entity can move something this complicated and important forward on its own. And so over the years, we've partnered in a whole bunch of different ways, from tap fee waivers to getting formal and informal input from council on what the priorities are, the housing needs assessment, development of the Affordable Housing Fund. We did Cemetery Street on village-owned land. And then the state and the further out you go from Yellow Springs, the more people want to see that there's local buy-in, and that means a layer of local funding in the project. So we try to minimize it to the extent possible, keep it at 10% or less as sort of the rule of thumb, but it's still really, really important. April Wolford.
Thanks. So just kind of back to this question of the family housing model. Two-part question. One is, can a family live in a one-bedroom apartment? Is there a family model that fits in a one-bedroom apartment? And what?
Yeah, so again, this comes back to fair housing. I'm looking at Kevin. I don't know if you know. There is a cutoff at which it's considered crowding, or
3 people per room, per bedroom?
no, I think it's a number of people per room, and that includes like common spaces and kitchens. But I can't remember what the number is. But below that threshold, then yeah, you can't tell a family that they can't live somewhere that they want to live.
Right, and if they have small children, I mean, that makes a lot of sense that you could have a one-bedroom apartment and save money.
Yeah, we've had 2 and plus households living in one-bedroom apartments.
And then the second part is again about that room. So if you have a 3-bedroom apartment, how many people then, what's the minimum number of people you can have on an application to?
That is a great question. So I think that this is why I wish Brittany was here, because she manages the rental program. But I believe that when we're prioritizing, we are thinking it's 1.5 people per bedroom, but that doesn't make sense because you can't cut people in half. So I think we end up deferring to prioritizing 1 person per bedroom as a floor. Janice.
Yes, is there already a wait list for the Cascades?
So we have an interest list that has over 300 household names on it, and that's for just rentals in general. And then what we'll do is when we're a month out from the project being done, so, close to the end of construction, we'll notify everybody on the interest list and everyone in the community more broadly, through our channels, not every single person, that this opportunity is available. Then we'll have a month open window where people can apply. And then at the end of that month, we will do a random number generator lottery, because that is actually the fairest way to apply for housing. So everyone has the same chance. Yes, Chamber of Commerce Executive Director Philip.
So for the one that we're looking at on the screen now, you mentioned that senior housing is going to be there.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if this is part of it, but the seniors that are on the list now, are they currently residents? And how is that ratio working when it comes to bringing families to Yellow Springs? Are their houses going to be for sale? Where are they going to go?
That's a great question. So what we found in our other property, on our rental properties specifically, is that it's about half and half. So 50% people who already live in town renting or perhaps owning, in this case because it's senior rentals, and then about 50% are folks who are either coming back or other reasons that they're coming to Yellow Springs. But pretty much everybody has a tie to the community in some way. Yeah. Yes, Linda. Wait, there's a staff.
There's someone over there too.
Someone who's over here. Oh, yeah, Mitzi. Mitzi Miller.
Yeah, I just want to clarify, because of your funding sources, we're talking about this being for Yellow Springs. Other community or other individuals from outside Yellow Springs can apply to come into the Cascades, I'm guessing. Am I right?
Yes, that's fair housing.
Right. And there's a set income, right?
Yes. Well, there are income limits for.
There will be income limits, and then there will be a lottery as to who gets it.
That is correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Is that for all 32 units? The lottery is for all 32 units?
The lottery, so the homeownership program works a little bit differently, but it's not a lottery-based system. But it will be the same thing where we have a period of time where we let everybody know that these houses are for sale, and then there's a certain date that you have to submit certain stuff by, and then we have system after that. But really is also following fair housing. So, yes, Dr. Kevin McGruder.
But is it accurate that you'll be doing a lottery for each phase? Though?
Yes, yeah, so there would be a separate lottery for each phase. Mhm. Yes, I don't know your name.
That's me, I'm Kellyanne Tracy.
Oh, Kellyanne Tracy, okay, yes.
So I've been here for 6 years, and I've seen what feels like a lot of opportunity that has come your way that has not fruitioned. And I can't imagine how frustrating it is for you. I know it's been frustrating for me and other people in the community that we've talked about it. How, as individuals and also as a community, can we best support you so that these opportunities can be fully taken advantage of?
Wow, that's a good question. Definitely by being involved, by becoming a member of the Land Trust, by coming to meetings like this, talking to your friends, and when there is an opportunity, for example, if there's a council meeting and we're on the agenda, coming in and having our voice heard. There's also a new group in town called Springers for More Springers that's been meeting, and I think they're kind of developing their own policy agenda around affordable housing. But definitely just, it's amazing how much impact one voice can have in Yellow Springs. Especially writing a letter, coming to a council meeting, even if we're not on the agenda, just coming and saying we really want to see more investment in affordable housing. That's just incredibly helpful. Linda Cox.
I think I asked this person before in the board that what is considered to be a senior, 50 years and older?
55.
Okay, thank you, Alex. It's 55 and up, which is, and it's actually, in one of our funding sources that's called elderly, and I'm like, are you, whoa, 55? That's terrifying.
We did not decide that.
Yeah, I don't think I was at that meeting.
In the funding trainings, everybody gasps, usually when they say that.
So because Linda asked the question, I have a comment. I think one thing that's, and I'm sure Kevin McGruder said, well, I'm not right with this. We've all forgot how important Antioch College was in terms of the community and having a community which was open to persons of all race, color, and religion. In fact, what is today the field where the geothermal wells are used to be a golf course, which was available to all persons because all the other golf courses that surrounded Yellow Springs were for white persons only. So I think that it's so important that folks need to understand that Home Inc. is stepping into this void which has been created by the demise of the college and its leadership around this whole issue of affordable housing.
Kevin?
Let me just from here.
No, you can hold the mic. I was just gonna, yeah.
Anyway, so the challenge, so Malta and I worked on a housing project, the Antioch College Village, which I think might have started out with an affordability element in mind, but it didn't come to fruition. It was very much environmentally sensitive, and it would have been a land that Antioch owned. And I think it would have been a good project, but the college's other challenges is why it didn't happen. And in a way, it's almost, you have to have a fairly strong financial foundation for an institution to do this work. And as you know, Antioch does not. That's not a secret. And so in a way, what Emily is saying is that Home Inc. is doing this, I've worked for and been on boards of other nonprofits that were not as strong financially, and they were doing challenging things, but I think that I just want to get in. So because I'm at the college and because I have a real estate background, I do try to bring the college into conversations, even if the leadership doesn't understand that we need to be there. And my own work now, I'm beginning to expand it from only Harlem to Yellow Springs. And Yellow Springs has a fascinating history in terms of race and real estate, and it's very different. And I do think, I haven't gotten there yet, that it intersects with what we're talking about now. So, and I haven't started that part, maybe what it means, but it definitely intersects here because I think that's a kind of underlying issue to some of the resistance to low-income housing, even though it's not spoken, that if you look at the narrative I talked about at the beginning. So what happens because blackness gets defined as deficiency is that is incorporated into real estate market. And so black homes appraise at lower values, and there's all these stories every now and then, a black couple have their white friend stand in, and all of a sudden the appraisal is like 50% more. That's not an anomaly. That's the legacy of that. And so when you think about what we're talking about now, even though black people aren't the only ones that benefit from affordable housing, I know there are some people who are afraid of black people coming in because I've been studying it so much, I have more empathy and sympathy for them that I don't. You know, it's painful as a black person to know that that's what they believe, but I understand how they got there because they were raised. Don't go in that neighborhood. You know? And so it's not spoken. There's a book called Cycles of Segregation by sociologists that talks about how we pick where we're going to live. And what they talk about is we have that narrative. So when we think about neighborhoods, we haven't even been to the neighborhood, but we think we know about it. And I think that is part of what I've experienced the same thing, maybe a little bit closer that Kelly and you were saying, is that these are opportunities, but there's a way that they get talked about as if they're threats.
Yes.
And that's what I think is part of it. And I think Yellow Springs has, that history of openness, but all of that time there were people who were not comfortable with that. Like we don't see them in the historical record.
Yes.
And but they were there.
Oh, we do.
Well, yes.
In the archives of the paper.
Yes, you're right.
You look in the archives that we do not publish.
You're right.
But it is there.
And so it's almost, how do we get to the point where we can hear them? Mm-hmm. And I was having a conversation with somebody recently. Because we don't hear them, we can't address their concerns. And hear them and have a conversation. And so there's this organized resistance that has historical base that it's going to stay there. And so we're trying to work, even though we're not acknowledging that that's, and I'm not saying everybody feels that way, but I think that's part of some of this too. And going back to Walter's question, I do think, now that I'm talking about it, I'm trying to think about how to use the Antioch platform maybe to kind of begin addressing that. That's going to take a while. But anyway, thank you for that.
Can you go back to that page that had the income numbers on there.
Yeah.
So one thing I want to say is that Omar Circle did not come. Omar Circle came out of a need. It came out of a problem and an issue. It didn't come just because they wanted to give black people some land. So that's proof in general that they didn't want people. Ohio is America, is America, is America. You know what I'm saying? So a lot of these things are in our brain and we don't think about them. So one of the problems is when we talk about affordable housing, people think that we're talking about people coming from outside, whether it's black, white, whatever, poor, whatever. And my goal is to put a face on what this is. You're talking about your neighbors that already work here. You're talking about the people that live with 5 or 6 people on people. You're talking about people who, someone asked a question about how did it get like this. I want to know how did the rental property be allowed to stay how it is. You know, the rental property that people rent here is subpar. There was this illusion that older people were going to move into the housing, that old bar project or whatever, and the younger people were going to move into affordable old housing here. It's not possible. Because all the money you're going to have to put into it to get up, right? No one talks about that. There's something going on there that nobody talks about that allowed me to get to that. But the other thing is, you're telling me, someone said this to me the other day, because I've been having these conversations. They said, no, everyone doesn't deserve to live where they work. And I said, you know what? I ain't even going to get you on that, but I'm going to get you on this. Yellow Springs and Antioch are not normal. You don't claim to be normal. You claim to be special. You claim to be different. Well, you got to live up to the opportunity when it's in there. This ain't normal what we're trying to do, but you say it's not normal. So what I'm saying is making space where people can live where they work, where your friends who serve you coffee. What you're saying is these people that you see every day that make less than $75,000 a year, you saying you don't want them to be your neighbors. And what you really said that offended me is that people don't listen to facts when they're given, and then we run on the internet with stuff. And so now it seems like one person says that they value a soccer field over kids and families. That's what it was saying, but it also seems like Home Inc. was trying to take something from somebody. When it's always been said, everyone has to come out with equal representation and equity at the table. If this doesn't work for this, then it doesn't work over here either. That's what has always been said. And the thing is, I know people aren't telling me. I know they aren't telling me, and I said this at the other meeting, everybody laughing about Fred. There are no Pele's that came from Yellow Springs. There are none. So I know they're not telling me that they value a piece of land over the ability, because nobody in here is a Native American that can tell me that mama and daddy's daddy, ain't nobody from here. Everybody got an opportunity to move here. Everybody should have an opportunity to live here, survive here, especially if you already given into the community. That's all I'm saying.
Thank you, True.
Amen.
I actually have a flow to you. that was like, I'm just soaking that in. Which is that I think in addition to maybe perceptions, whether implicit or explicit, we're also working against systems. You know, and so even Omar Circle, even the historical inclusiveness of Yellow Springs, just because it didn't have redlining didn't mean that it's not and continues to work within the context of these greater systems that are inherently classist and inherently racist and are really designed that way. And so when we're looking at, the real estate, when we're looking at the market development, et cetera, our message is definitely one where we want to have room for everybody at the table. We know that a community is stronger when we all have those interactions. But I also, at the same time, there's this reality that we're really swimming upstream. And we see this happen in other communities. Kevin's side in Harlem, where your values, what you stand for, just get rolled right over by the market. Now, obviously, market rate housing is important. It's really important. We need housing of all kinds to be a prosperous and whole, complete, unified community. But we know that the market is never going to do affordable housing, and so it does require public intervention, public effort, and just kind of coming back to what you said, I think we all in our hearts, the board and the staff of Home Inc. are holding that space for a wide range of emotions and frustrations and anger and hope and desperation. And I mean, there's so much that goes into making sure that people have a place to lay their head that's decent and affordable. But we are definitely working within broader systems that have been set up to perpetuate inequality.
We should probably take one or two quick questions and move on.
Oh, okay. One last question.
Okay.
Okay, and then the last thing I'll end on before we shift to our interactive activity, which April Wolford is going to lead, is just to say that I want to make sure that we're creating space for a lot of different, a diversity of opinion. Because I think it's really important, you know, it's okay to not want housing to go in a particular place or to be passionate about children's soccer, for example, which is a really important part of the community vibrancy. So we're always looking for win-wins, and I just want to reiterate that and say that I think it's really important that we're cultivating a safe space where people can really share their concerns and be heard. So with that, April.
PhD, and I had to go back psychologically and be a student, but I didn't want to do that and go back psychologically in where I live that way, and that's what the apartments felt like here. Like we don't have rental housing with the amenities that people with money want to be in, and there's no reason why we can't. And so part of it for me was thinking about, okay, if we can get those people, we can do inclusionary zoning and get 20 to 30% of people with 80% of median income in those. Like if you build enough units, then the numbers work. So, I mean, it's not a romantic issue, so I wasn't hearing people, but actually I was, so the idea about people looking out on the street and that.
Right, we all get to Alyssa's vision through something like that.
And like what, you would have a real nightlife in Yellow Springs if you had those apartments in those corridors.
Yeah, we need something other than the tavern and the saloon, though, I think.
Right, and that's what I mean, like you could have restaurants that would have,
on the first floor.
Sidewalk cafes past 9 o'clock here.
I like nothing controversial there, though.
Yes. It's just a thought.
I mean, that kind of allows for condominiums to the concept of running a smaller space instead of having the responsibilities of a single-family home in a yard and all of the other things that you have there. So more options, more living options. That's great.
Rob, I forgot to mention intergenerational housing and groups of people. So we're not, segregating ourselves by age.
Nice. Yeah, you want to wrap up?
No, I was just going to say Reverend Wolford. I mean, this is not really what you were talking about, but I heard a lot of music like you said, nightlife, and that was, oh yeah. Music was like everywhere, spontaneous barbecues, spontaneous gatherings, and just a sense of ease and joy and freedom and being together.
You know, that's such a neat thing. With a lot of our parties, we reserve for outsiders. I mean, we have weekends where people come for street fair, but then they come in. But when we have a Friday night block party downtown, where it's
years to do it, right?
yeah.
I had to wait 15 years to do that.
No, we do not. No, we can have a block party next week.
I've always had a party idea that, you know, the song Dancing in the Street.
Oh, yes. We have to kick it
A
off.
summer series.
We have to kick it off with that song, I'm sure. Yeah.
I was in San Diego, really place, last week, and they have many coffee shops, and I kind of forgot about that. I came from a bigger city, Buenos Aires, Argentina. We have a lot of coffee houses, and the people in San Diego, they know how to do that. And not only that, the group of people around the table, they were not one or two, there were 5 or 6. They were all different, different ages, gender, they looked different. That was really a nice mix of different people around the same table.
And that was in San Diego, you said?
Yes.
That's a very efficient.
Well,
All right, so, oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say that my husband and I live in the Glen College Pocket neighborhood. And we moved here from the East Coast. And we are just tickled with our neighborhood because we already have, a diverse group of people. We've got young people, we've got, I think John and I are the oldest, you know.
I don't think that's true.
Well, that's true. You know, but everybody speaks to each other, and you find that even our neighbors have accepted us, because a lot of us were outsiders. That's what they called us. But when you talk to people, you find out that you have a lot in common. I mean, we get garden tips, we get food tips, we have neighbors that bring us food. Yeah, they're bringing us stuff out of their gardens. And we also have a baby in our neighborhood, and we've got 2 babies in the woods. See, by us being up against the walking path behind Kind Friends, we've got 2 babies there. And to see baby carriages and people sitting on their porches talking to each other, and that's what we have right now. We kind of like that. I like to see baby, yeah, all of that. But in the future, what I saw was coming down Xenia Avenue, and I was thinking that if we are able to get those other cottages and apartments, there'll be more people, because I like having a lot of folks around. You know, we've always lived in cities, so this is kind of different. But anyway, but I would really love to see more diverse neighborhoods in this building. Not neighborhoods, restaurants in this building.
Restaurants.
You know, definitely more restaurants.
Restaurants.
Yeah, those are restaurants. Yeah.
I know.
And also, I'd like to see more people come. Yeah, say they like it is. I would really like to see more folks. So that's it.
Yeah, we actually really intend, I was gonna talk about this, but we ran out of time, but we actually were super intentional about building a really diverse community. And so with a move-in, the youngest resident was 3 and the oldest resident was 97. But that was all on purpose. So, is there anyone we haven't heard from? Because it's about time to wrap up. I can see a few people we haven't heard from. Is there anyone else who would like to share a takeaway or 2? Yes?
I like the idea of the restaurants, but I wanted to have food with a smell that's just overwhelming. I'm still waiting to experience that, but that's what I think would be a nice addition.
Just burgers.
Great, yes. To food diversity.
So thank you all for joining us. We're going to wrap up. We're going to have some social time after this so we can finish up the food and chat and kind of carry on our conversations. But I do want to thank you for joining us tonight. And I want to say one final piece about membership, which Emily mentioned in the course of the presentation. So the way you become a member of Homing is that you make a donation. So a donation at any level is membership, gives you a membership to Homing. And there are membership events that we have throughout the year, and there are going to be more of them, actually, because I'm working on that direct. We would love for you to become a member of Homing and join us at the annual meeting, which is on August 29th at the Barrel Room, where we'll be sharing a bunch of more information about what we've been doing and what we're going to be up to at that time, but we'll also share the insights that come out of this session there. I hope you'll agree that the work that we're doing here is crucial to the diversity of Yellow Springs and to the future of what our community will look and be like. Alex, do you have the donation envelopes over there, which we'll pass around? I also was trying to get a QR code, so we'll get more high-tech, as Truth said, later on. But you can always visit our website, homing.org.
YSHome.org.
Thank you, YSHome.org. I should study these things before I say them. Again, you can also volunteer, as we have, our board is a very active volunteer board. As Emily mentioned, the staff is a very small staff, four full-time people and 2 part-time people carry on all of the work that you saw here, plus all of the future work that they're preparing for the village. So the board is a great group of people to work with, fantastic group of people. So if you're interested in that, by all means talk to Emily. And then thank you again, and please enjoy the rest of the refreshments, and have a great evening. You want to say that?
Yeah, actually, I just had to say one more thing, which is, so we believe in building community from the inside out. So that means everybody that's here is part of this vision of a beloved community. Everyone that serves on our board, everyone that lives in the houses, everyone who's a member. So thank you for being part of realizing our dream of a truly diverse, inclusive, and strong village just by showing up today. So thank you.
Yeah, great. Thank you for all your insights.